Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined here by Ronnie Sanders. And of course, as always on Thursday with Phillip, we have Phillip Marshall on today. And looking forward to this episode. Phillip completed a couple Auburn head coaching interviews over the last few days. He was not interviewing head coaching candidates. He was interviewing sitting head coaches. And thought you guys would be really interested to hear some of his takeaways before you go over to auburnundercover.com, because after you listen to this on Thursday, there will be stories up on our website in the coming days from Phillip's interviews. So we got Hugh Freeze on the docket, and then Larry Vickers, the new Auburn women's basketball coach. Phillip was able to catch up with both of them, and so we'll start with your conversation with Hugh Freeze, Phillip, and I guess just kind of set the table. You told me before we got rolling that you guys went for over an hour. So probably no shortage of conversation pieces there. Just talk about some of your favorite moments from it and what you guys were able to dive into.
I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the interview. He was very gracious, and that's by far the longest conversation I have had with him. In fact, it was the first time I talked to him in his office, and but we talked about a whole lot of things, and not so much about what about this position or that position or those kinds of things, but more just about where he is and dealing with the circumstances of modern college football, which is about to drive every coach crazy, I think. But he did say this. He said that this team should be able to compete with anybody. He didn't certainly make any bold statements about they should win this or win that, but he does believe this is his team with the best chance to compete. And he also talked about last year, and he was very open and honest in that he said we should have won 4 more games than we did. And but he did point out, and it's very true, if you look back game by game at the games they lost, losing Alex McPherson was really, really costly to that team, because a kicker like that is extremely valuable in close games, which most of their games were close games. And but he, the thing is, I've said this, and he agreed with this, that every coach, from Nick Saban to Bear Bryant to Pat Dye to whoever, makes decisions during games that turn out not to be very good. But when you have no margin for error, like they have the situation they've been in, then you those times that happens are a lot more glaring, because a good chance it's going to cost you the game. But he talked about when he got here, and that he said that he knew that there were some positions where they were shorthanded. He said, but he was not really prepared for the circumstances that he found when he got here, and all the players that had left, and all those things that had happened, and it was eye-opening. And we talked a good bit about NIL and transfers and those things, and he said that the first year he was heavily personally involved in the NIL deals and all those things. He said, but then later on, he said, it almost drove me away. I don't think that's an exact quote, but he said, I just couldn't do it anymore and coach like I wanted to coach. And he said, and I don't do it anymore. He said, he's turned it over to the guys hired to do those things, and it's just not something he is heavily involved in. Of course, do you want this guy? How badly do you want this guy? But he said, in terms of talking to players about NIL deals and things like that, he just doesn't do it. And he feels very good about that. Of course, obviously, he feels good about the people he does have doing it, and I think that he thinks that I asked him a question. As I mentioned to you earlier, Nathan. I said, "What do you do?" This is in a hypothetical situation. I didn't ask him specifically about Jackson Arnold and Deuce Knight, but I said, if the guy you're paying $1.5 million, $2 million, and then there's a guy that's making $50,000 that's playing better than he is, and he said, "Well, it's my job as the coach to put the player on the field that gives us the best chance to win, regardless." And he said, "I'd be lying if I didn't say that when you got a situation like that, you're going to give the guy that's getting paid the first shot at winning the job." He said, "But you're not going to just say he's the guy because he's making money." He said, that's not something I would ever be willing to do."
Bill, did you find him as engaging a personality and as affable as Auburn's last coach?
Yes. He was great. He couldn't have been any better, and I think he's very, very comfortable at Auburn. I think he really likes Auburn, and he thinks that they're, while probably not all the way there, are close. And as I said earlier, he said close enough that he thinks they should be able to compete with everybody. Of course, the problem is you're close, you're there, whatever. There's a whole bunch of other SEC teams that are close in there too. And it's just brutal. And he talked about that some, said he's never experienced anything like it. And back to the NIL stuff, he said, I was at Liberty. He said, that wasn't the factor with us. He said, that's not even something we talked about. And then he gets here, and of course, it's completely different than when he left the SEC with all the NIL and all those things. So I think people will find a lot of what he said interesting. I'm going to do two parts of it, one Friday and one Saturday, and before that, Nathan will be in Birmingham at the Regions golf event, and he'll talk to him there. So if you want all you ever want to know about Hugh Freeze, this week is the week to get it on Auburn Undercover.
Yeah, and I think I'll be catching up with Bruce Pearl on Thursday evening at the Jimmy Rain fundraiser in Montgomery as well. So should be a busy week at the website. Phillip, you and I talked about this on the show a couple weeks ago, that you and I both agreed. I don't feel like anybody at Auburn has a number in mind or like what success actually looks like this season. But Hugh Freeze mentioned a little bit during the spring. How do you sort of sense that he's handling, I hesitate to say pressure of this season, because I don't think that's the right word, but it is more of a show me type of season, sort of a, like you said, he feels like this team can win. What did you sort of perceive as his confidence level about this year's team?
I don't think, from talking to him, I don't that he feels any particular pressure like I've got to do X, Y, and Z to keep my job. I don't think he's doing it that way. I think he feels pressure. They all feel pressure. I mean, to win, and he's at a place where, because I asked him, I said, "Do you still believe that, as you said early on, that this can be an elite program that can look the best in the country in the eye?" And he said, "Absolutely, 100%. I believe that." And he talked about, he said, "You have resources, you got facilities, you got a passionate fan base." He said, you got all the things that you need to do it here. And so I don't think he feels that. I am convinced that John Cohen's not sitting there saying, okay, he's got to win X number of games. My personal opinion is the only way he would come under any real the kind of heat that makes you lose your job would be if it was just a terrible season, and that would be hard. It would be hard to explain away another losing season, and certainly another season, a season where they just weren't any good. And you look at even last year. I mean, they had Missouri beat at Missouri. All the love Missouri's got, and if Robert Lewis doesn't let the ball go right through his hands in the end zone, not only are they going to win, they're probably going to win by a significant score, because probably Missouri never would have put their starting quarterback back in, which they probably shouldn't have done anyway. But the miracles of modern medicine when the hospital is right next door to the stadium. But that game, obviously the Oklahoma game, I mean, and that's one of those games they missed three. Yeah, they gave up the big play and then threw the interception, but they missed 3 field goals that would have made those things not a factor. The Cal game, I mean, they should have won more than they did, and he recognizes that as well as anybody. My opinion is that he's not. I don't think Cohen is viewing this as he's got to do this or that, or we're going to make a change. I think Cohen's intention was always to give him at least 4 years, and I think that that's still his intention.
Do you feel like, we had Jay Jacobs on?
Sorry, Ronnie, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I said, we had Jay Jacobs on last week, and he talked about the importance of fit. My personal opinion, and just based on what I've seen, is Freeze is a much better fit than Harsin, but he has outside of some of the games and the way that they've lost him, he seems to have certainly endeared himself to Auburn people, especially with the recruiting.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, and he had shown it in the past, but he is a remarkable recruiter, or he and the recruiting setup, and gosh, so that's all these things that are so different. I mean, go back to when you were a GA at Auburn, Ronnie, and compare just the size of the staff, the support staff, then and now. I mean, they got so many people doing so many different things, and that's nothing unique to Auburn. It's everybody now. It's just the way it is. I mean, I remember last year they had a picture from Florida of all the people that work for football sitting in the stands. I mean, it was a set-up picture, but I mean, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And
I can personally attest that about I probably did, about 15 of those people's jobs when I was there. I mean, there weren't many of us, and we all had to, pitch in.
I'm so old that I remember when the entire athletic department was housed at Beardee's Coliseum, and football coaches were two to an office that were about maybe a fourth of the size of their individual offices now. And it was a desk, a projector in the middle, another desk, and a screen up on the wall. I mean, that was what it was. And now, of course, I mean, everything's real different than that. And but that's everywhere, like I said, and it's where this whole thing is headed is going to be, and we talked about that some too, obviously. The problem right now is it's May, the middle of May, and they don't know where it's headed yet. But he was very adamant, I think, as most head coaches are, that there needs to be just one transfer portal opening. It just needs to be open once. And he said in January, because I mean, you had this year, you had people transferring in December, enrolling in school, going through spring practice, and then transferring again. So they don't know what you don't know what your roster in January. You have no idea what your roster is going to look like. But you don't know who's going to leave. It's crazy, and obviously that's not just football, but I think it's more significant in football because of the numbers, and he's very much in favor of a NFL type deal replacing spring practice. And his idea is 10 practices in June. Once you know who your roster is, who you got, everybody's healthy, and which makes sense to me because actually 10, they only get 15 practices. And he said himself, he said, we don't even use all 15 in spring. He said, because you got so many people, he said, it's just not, he said, people that are hurt, people can't practice, people not full speed. You don't know who your roster is yet. And, but that made sense to me. And I kind of get the feel that that's something like that as far as spring practice goes is where we're headed, because I have spent years trying to make people understand before A-Day games that they don't matter. That it's a scrimmage and not even a very good one. That's all. But it's good to have something like Auburn did this year, where you give people an opportunity to come back and tailgate and be back on campus and all that stuff. But it'll be interesting. I like I said, I think people will find that interview very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear from you, Phillip, that Freeze looks back on last season and says, yeah, we should have had more opportunities to win games, because I don't think it was the same case in year one, but he had some introspection last offseason about, particularly it was the New Mexico State game, and he sort of looked back and said, that's too much of a theme for me. He had talked about losing to New Mexico State when he was at Liberty, talking about losing to I believe UL Monroe when he was at Liberty. He was like, I need to look inward. And I think, some of that stuff last season was some questionable in-game decisions for him.
Yeah.
Like Jarquez Hunter doesn't touch the ball barely in the second half against Vanderbilt. Peyton Thorne throws the pick six, but they're still throwing the ball toward the end of that game. And so I wonder if this is, those first couple years did have some painful moments for Auburn, but I wonder if they were also some learning moments for Hugh Freeze.
I don't think there's any question about it, and I think he would tell you the same thing. My question, and I didn't really talk to him at length about this, is about the play calling setup. I think that he's in a difficult situation, like a lot of coaches, in that, I mean, basically he's where he is largely because he was, for two reasons: his recruiting prowess, and he was viewed as one of the very best play callers in the game. And the play calling last season, I don't think it was as haphazard as some people think it was. I don't think it was so haphazard that they were just guessing here and there. I mean, they had very specific things about who watched the passing game, who watched the running game, and I think and all coaches have this. You have suggestions. You have even if the head coach is the play caller, you have somebody in the press box saying, "Hey, you might want to consider this." Is that your experience, Ronnie?
You've always got people in your ear.
And but at the same time, some things happened, the 4th and 1 against Georgia, which he said after the game, he said, I could tell something was wrong. I should have called timeout. Well, that being the case, why didn't you? I mean, that's a fair question. If you should have, why didn't you? Now, the whole cluster at the end of the half against Kentucky, which got a lot of attention. I kind of I kind of understood what happened there. I mean, they told Peyton Thorne, okay, this is the guy that we think will be open, and if he's open, throw it to him, and if he's not, throw it out of the end zone. Well, he wasn't, but Peyton didn't throw it out of the end zone. He tried to scramble and got tackled, and then they weren't really prepared to run the field goal team on the field with against the clock like that, and it looked really bad. And of course, it didn't end up mattering in the game, but and the whole, I think I would have to think that the worst day in Hugh Freeze's Auburn career, if not his coaching career, was the New Mexico State game, and that was just, I mean, a team that could have, should have, would have beaten Alabama a week later just gets dominated by New Mexico State. I mean, if there was one thing I would look at and say, can you excuse this? There was no way to excuse what happened in that New Mexico State game. They clearly were not ready to play, and didn't get ready. And I've had many coaches tell me, say, if you're not ready, if you don't get ready before Saturday, it's too late.
That's right.
And but that loss was reminiscent to me of when Auburn should have lost to Jacksonville State in 2015, and would have if whoever calls the plays for Jacksonville State hadn't lost their mind, and they hadn't tackled that quarterback all day long, and it's third and I think 4, and if Jacksonville State makes a first down, then they're kneeling down with the ball. It's over. And they just turn around and hand it off to the running back, running like an inside zone. And I think sometimes in games like that, coaches, and I've seen it before, okay, they played well, they're ahead. They played well, they're ahead, and they get it. They tend to forget that the other team still has better players than they do. And to think you're just going to hand it off straight ahead on arguably the biggest play of the game against a team that's got better players than you and make the first down, it's not very smart. But like I said, every time that quarterback got on the edge the whole game, they had a hard time getting him down. So much so they tried to sign him. But he it just is. That's always amazing to me. Right, this would be before your time. In 1990, Auburn was ranked like number 2 in the nation, and they played Louisiana Tech, who at the time was in their first year in Division I. And Louisiana Tech is ahead 14-13, and has the ball on Auburn side of the 50, 4th, and I want to say 2. That could be wrong. But they punt it and give it back to Auburn. And like I said, give it back to the team that's got better players than they do. And Auburn went right down the field and kicked the field goal and won the game. And they were 2 yards. Louisiana Tech, again, was 2 yards away from kneeling down with the ball. But that was a really bad game, too. But I think that
those over the years. You remember the Utah State game and the
Utah State and Northeast Louisiana, which is now Louisiana Monroe, when Terry was in the press box because it had neck surgery, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think it was. Yeah,
they should have lost that game too. They had to have a goal line stand and get the ball back and go win the game. Threw a touchdown pass to who was the fullback? Kevin McLeod. Yep. And but I mean, everybody has those games. Saban lost to UAB at LSU. He
I was
lost
there
the-
for that. I was that was and that was before replay, and the officials are standing out in the middle of the field looking up the replay board, trying to figure out where to spot the ball. I mean, we talk about it.
And lost to Louisiana Monroe at Alabama. So it happens. But getting back to that New Mexico State game, if that had been a weird game and they won by 1, that would have still been bad. But to just get dominated by them, that was amazing. And it probably made Diego Pavia a lot of money.
No doubt.
Because he became the guy that a lot of people wanted.
Phillip, how many games can this team win this year?
Can they win?
How many will
I
they win?
think they got a chance to beat. I think that if I was saying what is the absolute ceiling, I would say 10 games. And if you ask me what the floor is, I'd say 7 games.
What's your
Somewhere between
prediction?
7 and 10. That's not a very. That's not the best. The bravest prediction, but I'd say somewhere between 7 and 10 games, probably 8 or 9. And this is the year under the current setup, and it's going to remain that the years Alabama and Georgia both come to Auburn, that's your best chance.
Yep.
I mean, 2013, would Auburn still have beaten Alabama if they had played in Tuscaloosa? Maybe, but it would have been a lot less likely. Now Georgia, they just horsewhip. But would they have beaten Georgia in Athens? Gus never showed any ability at all ever to beat Georgia in the state of Georgia, so probably not. And but that's obviously that's when the one exception to that was before the schedule changed, when it was 2010. They played Georgia at home and they played Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And that's one of the most remarkable. All the comebacks I've ever seen, that one may have been the most memorable. 24-0 down behind in Tuscaloosa.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
I wonder which one of those for Alabama fans. I wonder what's their worst nightmare, 2010 or 2013?
Oh, I would think have to be 2013, because the 2010 team had already lost 3 games. They weren't going. They weren't going to the BCS. But having said that, they had a golden opportunity to keep Auburn from doing that, and they didn't. But 2013, Alabama was going to be playing for it, and because they also would have beaten Missouri in the SEC championship game, and to lose like that, that was, that game was. I mean, Auburn in 2010, other than Trent Richardson dropping the ball, a touchdown pass, Auburn took that game back. 2013, Alabama gave them a good bit of help. I mean, they missed 3 field goals in the second half, and yes. And then the kick 6. But the one thing that's always bothered me about the perception of that game is, one, that Auburn wouldn't have won without it. I don't know that. Auburn had outscored them 21-7 since being behind 21-7, and it would have been overtime at Auburn. I think the odds would still have favored Auburn winning the game, and Nick Marshall would be a pretty good overtime quarterback.
Especially that season.
But still, even once they did it, I mean, it wasn't some kind of a fluke. They sent him back there. Ellis Johnson sent him back there, and best kick returner in the SEC made a great return. I mean, to me, that's not a fluke. That's just a play.
Yeah.
Phillip,
I mean, Alabama was about to three-peat was trying to three-peat in 2013. Yeah. So, I mean, that was a huge, and they felt pretty good. I mean, had they lost in the regular season before that? No. They hadn't lost before that game. Alabama hadn't. Yeah, I think you mentioned it, Phillip. I mean, you put a lot of the factors together of Freeze feels like this is his best team. I mean, everybody feels like this is his best team at Auburn. You've learned from your mistakes first couple years. It's kind of time to put up a little bit. And you get Georgia and Alabama at home. I just think if we get to the end of the season, if we're sitting here talking in December and they have stolen one of those games from Georgia, Alabama, I think that will make a huge, huge difference for their season. Huge.
There's no question. I mean, it shouldn't be this way. But if it had not been for 4th and 31, the fans would be viewed completely differently right now than they do. And that was, you can question so many things about that. Who made the call? You hear different stories from different people. Who made the call to be in that defense and let him just stand back there like he did? However, if DJ Williams would have done what he was supposed to do, and if the safety had done what he was supposed to do, it wouldn't have mattered. But DJ was supposed to backpedal all the way to the end zone, and instead, that's Auburn's best defensive back. And instead, he tried to press him. The safety, Zion Puckett, was supposed to, when he got in the end zone, was supposed to double cover him, and he ran exactly the opposite direction of the way he was supposed to run. If you watch, you can see it on tape if you ever watch it. He just goes on a dead sprint away from the play. And I knew when the quarterback, because I was expecting, I think everybody was expecting, he was just going to throw it up for grabs in the end zone. But when he threw it, I said, that's not a Hail Mary. He's throwing it to somebody. And sure enough, he was. And that was one of the more devastating losses I've witnessed for Auburn. Because the fans, everybody else, they're just waiting to celebrate. It's over. And I thought it was when they had the bad snap that resulted in it being 4th and 31. Yeah. I said, it's over. They got no chance. And but they did. and then something else that sticks with me is that Auburn, even after that happened, they just needed a field goal to win. And they got old Kevin Steele just on the first play after that. Well, first they tried to return the kickoff out of the end zone. That was the first mistake they made. And then old Kevin Steele just sent the absolute house after him on the first play. And here's the funny thing about it, because I've taught a lot of football with Kevin Steele. I could have told him that's what he was going to do. I knew exactly what he was going to do. And they should have been ready for that, to get rid of the ball quick, and who knows. But 4th and 31 will live in Auburn infamy. There's no question about that. Just like kick six and punt Bama punt will live in Alabama infamy.
It's funny how these get the Iron Bowls. They all end up with not at least the big ones end up with names.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was. I've seen some strange ones. I'm going to get way back before y'all's time now. In 1974, Auburn was 8-2 and Alabama was 9-1. Or no, maybe Alabama was undefeated, I think. Yes, they were. They were undefeated. And Auburn was driving toward what would have been the winning touchdown. And they had a play, which was a tight end reverse that they had run all season. And with success. Dan Nugent was a tight end who became about a 10-year standout NFL left tackle. He was a great athlete. And so they are running this play. And Phillip Gargas, the quarterback, goes to hand it off. And when he does to Nugent, my future Alabama coach, Mike Dubose, goes right between him and just takes the ball away. And the funny thing is, I asked you both about that later, and he said, "I thought it was a pass." And he said, and then there I am, and I look, and the ball's right there. He said, so I grabbed it. But Van Tiffin's 52-yard field goal to win the game after Auburn reverse, and Lawyer Tillman's reverse, and the next greatest comeback in the Iron Bowl was for Auburn, was down 17-0 in 1970, and Auburn was literally out of linebackers. I mean, not just out of starting linebackers. Their starting linebackers in the Iron Bowl were Ronnie Ross, who was the starting tight end, and James Owens. Neither one of them had ever played linebacker ever in their lives. And they're the starting linebackers against Alabama with 1 week to learn how to be that. And Alabama just is dominating the game. And they go ahead 17-0. Auburn finally scores and makes it 17-7. And Alabama is driving again. Or maybe it was 17-3. I'm not sure. But anyway, Alabama's driving again. And Scott Hunter throws a pass and throws it right straight to Ronnie Ross, who intercepts it, and the game changed right there. And Auburn, it was 17-10 at the half, and then Auburn won 33-28. And but I asked Hunter about that one time, who was for a long time a TV guy in Mobile, good guy. And about that play, he said, you get in a rhythm. And he said, and you know who's going to be where. And he said, so I threw the ball. He said, and you wish you had a string on it to pull it back. He said, he wasn't supposed to be there. And like I said, and Ronnie Ross, the late Ronnie Ross, told me, he said, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I just ran backwards. He said, that's all I did. He said, and I looked up, and there came the ball. And so I had a lot of great stories, but in all my years, I've seen a lot of them. But I'd kind of get away from what we're talking about. I think this Auburn team should be good. I won't say they should be great. I won't say even that they'll beat Baylor. I think Baylor's probably going to be good too. They finished with like 5 or 6 straight wins last season, didn't they? Yep. I believe. And the most interesting game might be the first conference game at Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold going home. That'll be most interesting. But I mean, yeah, you're playing Georgia and Alabama at home, but that doesn't mean you're going to beat them. I mean, all these games, it's just brutally hard, and sometimes it just comes down to the mouse of the ball. I mean, close games like that, it just you never know. But my personal opinion is what needs to happen is Auburn needs to look like a good team. Now, whatever that results in, as far as but they need to look like a good and well prepared team. And having said that, I always find it amusing when fans say, we weren't prepared. Well, the other team prepares too, and they got $1 million coordinators too. And I just don't think usually against New Mexico State, they weren't prepared. Now, whose fault was that? Well, it falls on the head coach, but it also falls on players who clearly didn't take it seriously. And speaking of Kevin Steele earlier, he told me about that next game, the 4th and 31 game. He said, after that New Mexico State game, there was no convincing our players that Auburn could beat them. He said they absolutely were unconcerned and almost should have bit them in the rear end.
Phillip, before we wrap up, give us your impressions on the. You also interviewed the new women's basketball coach this week.
Right. Very impressive man. Very impressive man. He one of the things that I'm going to write about that he talked about this is that I asked him. I said, you know, coming from a historically black HBCU team program, I said not a lot of people have done that. Come from there to the SEC, and he said, I don't know if I would call it pressure. He said, but I recognize. He said, I do recognize that a lot of people are going to be watching. He said, and I obviously didn't know this. He said, I am one of three African American male head coaches in women's college basketball at the Power Conference women's college basketball. And I hadn't really thought of that, but it's true. And he's also by far the tallest coach in women's college basketball. But you know, he was. So I think he views it as a real opportunity that not many people in his position would have gotten. But he also believes, and I think accurately so, that hey, look at what I did, where I was, where we had nothing, where we had no resources, zero. And but I think, he asked me because we were just talking, and Wes Todd, the media relations guy, was in there, and we just were talking about, the teams that were successful because he was writing it down, and I'm talking about women's tennis going from mediocre to the Sweet 16, and I just made the statement. I said, "Yeah, that guy did a remarkable job." And then Larry asked me. He said, "Well, what's it going to take for you to say that I did a remarkable job in my first year?" And that was a pretty hard question. And I said, "To put a team on the floor that maximizes itself, that's as good as it can be, however good that is." I mean, they've only got 2 players back from last year's team. And so, it's anybody that thinks that any coach is just going to say, well, you're recruiting women's basketball players at Auburn. You got NIL money, but you don't have NIL money to go grab somebody that's between you and LSU or you and South Carolina or you and UConn, and so it's going to take a little while to know, and he recognizes that. And he talked about it. He said, what I look for. He said, I want people who love basketball. And he coached men. He played, obviously, and he coached men before he coached women. And he said, no matter how unrealistic it is when you're coaching men, they all think they're going to the NBA. Yeah. He said, what you have to try to do is get people that love the game, because they're going to think that is get people that love the game. And he said, coaching women, the funny thing he said, when I started coaching women, I could sleep at night. I could turn my phone off because I knew I wasn't going to get any calls in the middle of the night about somebody being in trouble. And he said, I didn't have a player that thought she was going to play professional basketball. He said, but I had all players who love the game. And he said, now what you hope is, he said, I still want all players who love the game, but I want players who are good enough that maybe they think they can play professional basketball, whether it's in the WNBA or in Europe or wherever. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I would think he would be. He just seems like the kind of person that players would gravitate to and want to play for, as far as play hard for. But I mean, you're talking about football. I mean, the difference between two, maybe three programs, well, three, Texas, South Carolina, and LSU. There is a gulf between them and everybody else in the SEC and pretty much in college basketball. So catching up to them is a long challenge.
Well, Phil, it's been good to spend Thursday with you again.
Always.
Absolutely.
And we'll see how long Auburn's softball team lasts. In Tallahassee, they did not expect Florida State. They expected Clemson or Duke is where they would go, and it's the women's softball committee is the hardest. Do they play favorites? Unquestionably, without a doubt. And but Auburn, Georgia, and Kentucky were going to go to Clemson, Duke, and Florida State. There wasn't much question about that. And Auburn had they claim they don't look at conference records at all. Well, Auburn had one less conference win than both of those other two, and a far better RPI and far stronger strength of schedule than any of them. And Auburn got sent to Tallahassee, and Georgia to Duke, and Kentucky to Clemson. It's kind of hard to figure out. But I talked to Chris Malveaux before the selections show on Sunday, and he said I just hope we stay close enough to home. We don't have to go through the whole travel rigmarole of going and getting on a plane and all that stuff. And so they got their wish on that, and they played Florida State in a exhibition series, the last one in the fall, and Florida State won both games, but they were pretty close. And Auburn hit their pitchers that they had at the time, but damn, that's then and now, and it's a different deal. And those were practices. This matters. But the first biggest thing for them is they got to deal with South Florida, who's also good, and that in the first game. And but usually this is twice in a row, and I think 3 out of the last 4 years they've been sent to Tallahassee.
It seems like it happens a lot in softball and baseball.
It used to really happen in baseball. In baseball, they used to have the hosting didn't have anything to do with accomplishment other than you had to be in the tournament, obviously. And it was a bid deal. And Florida State hosted every year. I mean, not just some years, every year, as did LSU. And if Auburn didn't host, they got sent to Tallahassee. I mean, it was automatic. And Hal Baird's first College World Series team in '94 won at Clemson. His second one in '97 won at Florida State when David Ross, not in the championship game, but in the winners bracket game, hit a 3-run homer on I think an 0-2 count, but it was 2 strikes, I know, to win the game. And but obviously it's a huge advantage to play at home, and especially because I mean last year in Tallahassee, it was full. I mean there were like 5,000 or 6,000 people there for the softball tournament, and but it's supposedly. Geography is not supposed to be the overriding thing for the top 2 seeds, the top 32. But it sure seems like it turns out to be that way. I mean, Ole Miss and Mississippi State get sent west every year. I guess just because they're the furthest west SEC teams. But if you got to go to Los Angeles, it's no harder or better to go from Mississippi to Los Angeles than it is to go from Alabama or Georgia or wherever to Los Angeles. It's a long way either way you do it. It'll be fun. I think the baseball team's got a real chance. I don't think they're going to have to go anywhere probably. So
Yep.
they've got a real chance to do something really special.
Well, Phillip, when will these so people can go look out? You said Friday and Saturday for your Hugh Freeze. When will you write about Larry Vickers?
Wednesday. Is that no, that's wrong. Thursday. And tomorrow I'll tell the story of which is Wednesday, as we do this on Tuesday, of Anna Lee Adams, who is the most prolific freshman in Auburn softball history, and
that's crazy.
Who learned how to hit in her family barn in Indiana with her daddy, and they have a cattle farm, and she's a really, really unique young lady, and I think that one will be fun too. But, so be Anna Lee on Wednesday, and it'll be Larry on Thursday, and Hugh on Friday and Saturday.
And then recruiting into the weekend, so it's a good week to spend over at auburnundercover.com. Phillip, thank you as always. Really enjoyed the conversation. We will talk to everybody later.
All right.